Have you ever wondered why some people seem to carry peace even before their circumstances change? What if the greatest miracle of the morning was never the sunrise itself, but what happened inside those who awakened before it? Most people begin the day searching for answers in the visible world. Yet Jesus consistently moved from an invisible reality into visible provision. Somewhere along history, two ancient Aramaic words were translated so simply that their transformative depth almost disappeared. One became little more than spirit. The other became merely father. But what if those translations left behind an entire way of living? What if the dawn was never simply the beginning of another day, but the doorway into divine alignment? The earliest light may have carried a rhythm that modern language can no longer fully express. Today we are returning to that forgotten rhythm. We are stepping beyond the fear of financial lack, beyond the anxiety of never having enough, and beyond the belief that abundance begins with possessions. Through Rucha and Abun, we will rediscover how Jesus approached each new morning before the world demanded anything from him. Stay until the end, because what these two words truly reveal may completely transform the way you greet every sunrise from this day forward. Before the crowds gathered, before the miracles unfolded, before the demands of the day surrounded him, Jesus repeatedly withdrew into places of silence. The Gospels describe him seeking the early hours, long before the noise of ordinary life filled the air. This detail is often treated as a simple habit of prayer, yet the pattern itself deserves far more attention. In the Gospel of Mark, chapter 1, and throughout the Gospel of Matthew, the morning becomes the place where visible action is prepared by invisible alignment. That order is never accidental. The kingdom revealed by Jesus always begins within before it becomes visible without. Modern culture trains us to believe that abundance begins with income, opportunity, or possession. The Aramaic worldview begins somewhere entirely different. It begins with the inner atmosphere from which every decision, every relationship, and every act of faith emerges. Dawn becomes more than a moment on the clock. It becomes a doorway where human awareness is invited to synchronize with divine reality before fear has an opportunity to dictate the direction of the day. This explains why so many people work harder yet continue feeling empty. External effort without internal alignment often produces exhaustion instead of peace. Jesus demonstrated another rhythm. He never appeared driven by panic over tomorrow. Even when surrounded by scarcity, his words consistently released confidence instead of fear. That confidence did not come from circumstances, but from communion with the source that never runs dry. The first light of morning symbolized more than a new beginning. It reflected the continual invitation to awaken into a reality where provision already existed before human striving began. This ancient perspective challenges everything modern thinking assumes about success. It asks whether abundance is first received inwardly before it can ever appear outwardly. The deeper we look into the language Jesus actually spoke, the more this possibility begins to unfold, revealing that the first breath of dawn may have carried far greater significance than history has allowed us to remember. As we move closer to the language spoken by Jesus, we immediately encounter one of the greatest misunderstandings created by modern translation: the Aramaic word. Rucha is commonly translated as spirit or sometimes simply as breath. While neither translation is entirely incorrect, both are incomplete when separated from the living worldview in which the word existed. Rucha carries the image of living breath, moving wind, divine vitality, creative life, and the invisible movement through which God's presence becomes active within a person. It is dynamic rather than static. It is experienced rather than merely defined. The same reduction has happened with Abuen. Modern readers usually see only the word father, yet the original Aramaic expression carries layers of intimacy, origin, nurturing source, creative presence, and the one from whom life continually flows. It is not merely a title spoken toward heaven. It describes an ongoing relationship with the eternal source of existence itself. When these words are flattened into single English equivalents, something essential disappears. The morning practice modeled by Jesus is no longer seen as entering into living communion with divine reality, but becomes little more than a religious routine. The focus quietly shifts from inner transformation toward external requests, and many begin searching for provision while remaining disconnected from the source of provision. This subtle misunderstanding has influenced generations of readers without them ever realizing what was lost between languages. Yet the ancient Aramaic expression still preserves the original movement. It reveals that Jesus was not teaching people to chase abundance. He was teaching them to awaken into a reality where divine life was already flowing before the day's first challenge appeared. And what these two words actually meant to Jesus himself goes even deeper than most scholars or translations ever explain. If you've made it this far, it was not by accident. Few are truly ready to go deeper, and that's perfectly fine. One more important note before you continue: the Aramaic spoken by Jesus carries layers of meaning that are closely connected to its sound, rhythm, and expression. Because of this, you may occasionally hear slightly different pronunciations of the same word. To help you experience the original teaching more clearly, we display the Aramaic word on screen together with its pronunciation and its meaning. If you would like to explore these ancient teachings in greater depth, you'll find our study guides in the pinned comment below. With gratitude for walking this path together, the next chapter reveals why Jesus used these words in a completely different way from the interpretations most people have inherited, and that discovery changes everything. And the best is yet to come in the next chapters. You'll discover what could change everything for you. If Jesus had intended Abun to mean only father, the conversation would almost end there. Yet every time he revealed the kingdom, he invited people into something far greater than a simple title for God. In the Aramaic world, Abun expresses the living source from whom existence continually flows. It carries the sense of the one who generates, sustains, nurtures, and continually brings life into being. It is relational rather than distant, immediate rather than abstract. When Jesus began the prayer commonly called the Lord's Prayer with Abun, he was not merely identifying whom his listeners should address. He was first repositioning their awareness. Before asking for anything, they were invited to remember the inexhaustible origin from which everything already comes. This completely changes the order of spiritual life. Modern thinking begins with need and hopes to arrive at provision. Jesus began with the certainty of divine fullness, allowing every request to emerge from trust instead of anxiety. That reversal transforms the entire experience of faith. Fear loses its authority because lack is no longer the starting point of consciousness. The same movement appears in Rucha. Rather than describing a passive spiritual concept, Rucha reveals the living current through which divine vitality continuously moves. Every breath becomes a reminder that life itself is being received rather than manufactured. At dawn, when the world is still quiet, breathing consciously becomes an act of remembrance. It is not the breath itself that possesses mystical power. The power belongs to the divine life that the breath continually. As Jesus entered the silence before sunrise, he demonstrated complete dependence upon the Father rather than dependence upon circumstances. His confidence flowed from continual communion instead of external certainty. This explains why storms, crowds, opposition, and scarcity never determined his inner condition. His internal rhythm had already been established before the day began. Viewed through this lens, abundance becomes much more than financial increase. Financial provision certainly has its place, yet Jesus consistently revealed abundance as wholeness flowing from restored union with God. A person can possess wealth while living under constant fear, or possess little while walking in extraordinary peace. The kingdom never glorifies poverty, nor does it idolize possessions. Instead, it restores the inner condition from which wise stewardship, creativity, generosity, discernment, and faithful action naturally emerge. That is why those who lived closest to Jesus repeatedly displayed courage under impossible circumstances. Their confidence rested upon the endless source, represented by ABWOON, continually renewed through the living movement of Ruach. When these two words are understood together, the dawn becomes far more than another morning ritual. It becomes the daily realignment of identity. Before checking accounts, before reading troubling headlines, before remembering yesterday's disappointments, the disciple first remembers where life originates. That remembrance quietly reshapes every decision made throughout the day. The invisible reality begins influencing the visible one. Provision is no longer pursued from panic, but received with wisdom, diligence, gratitude, and trust. This is the rhythm rhythm that continues inviting every generation into a life where peace precedes provision and communion, precedes every visible blessing. The practical question now becomes unavoidable. If Jesus lived from this rhythm every morning, what prevented so many people from recognizing it? The answer is surprisingly simple. Human attention naturally gravitates toward visible results, while overlooking invisible preparation. We admire the miracles, yet ignore the silence that came before them. We celebrate the multiplication of bread while forgetting the inward alignment that preceded every act of compassion. The kingdom rarely begins with dramatic events. It usually begins with quiet transformation hidden from public view. Dawn perfectly represents this principle because the world changes gradually before anyone notices the light. In the same way, spiritual renewal often begins long before external circumstances reveal that anything has changed. Such remembrance does not eliminate responsibility, nor does it replace work, planning, or faithful stewardship. Instead, it changes the inner atmosphere from which those actions arise. Decisions made from fear often produce hurried mistakes, while decisions born from peace tend to reflect wisdom and patience. This pattern appears repeatedly throughout Scripture. Those who trusted God's provision acted differently because they perceived reality through confidence rather than through panic. Their circumstances were often difficult, yet their inner posture remained remarkably steady. This perspective also transforms how we understand the phrase, "our daily bread." The emphasis is not merely on receiving enough food for another day. It reflects continual dependence upon the living source who faithfully sustains every aspect of life. Material provision matters because human beings live within physical reality. Yet Jesus continually redirected attention toward the kingdom that gives meaning to every earthly blessing. Bread without peace cannot satisfy the soul. Wealth without purpose eventually becomes another form of emptiness. Security without communion remains fragile because it depends entirely upon changing circumstances. The Aramaic vision revealed by Abun and Rucha restores the proper order. Communion comes first. Identity follows. Wisdom emerges naturally. Then faithful action produces fruit that reflects the character of God's kingdom rather than the pressure of human fear. This is why the early morning carries such profound symbolic power. Before the demands of the world shape our thoughts, we are invited to remember the one from whom all true provision flows. That remembrance quietly becomes the foundation for everything that follows. It does not promise instant prosperity or effortless success. Instead, it forms a stable heart capable of recognizing opportunities, practicing generosity, exercising discernment, and remaining faithful, regardless of temporary circumstances. Such abundance cannot be measured only by numbers, because it begins where no human eye can see. Yet over time its fruit becomes unmistakably visible in every area of life. Thank you for getting this far. If the awakening of consciousness is hitting you hard, it's a sign that you're ready to go deeper. The study guides are waiting for you in the pinned comments. The greatest transformation Jesus demonstrated was not the ability to escape difficult circumstances, but the ability to enter every circumstance already anchored in the reality of God's kingdom. This is the invitation hidden within Abun and Rucha. It is not a technique to control life, nor is it a formula for guaranteed material success. It is a daily return to the source from which life, wisdom, peace, and faithful provision continually flow. Every sunrise becomes an opportunity to choose alignment before activity, communion before consumption, and trust before fear. Tomorrow morning, before reaching for your phone or allowing yesterday's concerns to shape your thoughts, pause for a single moment. Take one slow, intentional breath, and remember Rucha as the living reminder that every breath is received, not earned. Then quietly turn your heart toward Abun, recognizing the eternal source who already knows every need before a single request is spoken. Allow gratitude to replace urgency. Let peace become stronger than pressure. From that place, step into your responsibilities with diligence, compassion, wisdom, and confidence. This simple rhythm will not remove every challenge, but it can completely change the person who walks through those challenges. The kingdom revealed by Jesus has always moved from the inside outward. Inner restoration becomes the foundation for outward faithfulness, and outward faithfulness often opens doors that fear could never recognize. The abundance of the kingdom is not measured only by what enters your hands, but also by what fills your heart, guides your decisions, strengthens your relationships, and shapes your response to every new day. The first light of dawn quietly reminds us that divine provision always begins before we can fully see it. Every sunrise becomes another invitation to walk in that invisible reality until it gradually becomes visible through the way you live, speak, serve, and trust. As this journey comes to its close, remember that the greatest treasure preserved within the Aramaic words of Jesus is not hidden information reserved for a select few. Their deepest purpose is to restore a way of seeing, living, and trusting that has always been available to those willing to seek with humble hearts. Abwin reminds us that we are never separated from the eternal source of life. Rucha reminds us that every breath is an invitation to participate in that living relationship. Together, they reveal that true abundance begins long before circumstances begin to change. Perhaps tomorrow your financial situation will remain exactly the same. Perhaps some unanswered questions will still be waiting for you. Yet if your inner foundation has shifted from fear to trust, everything else begins to change with it. This was the quiet strength that radiated from Jesus throughout his ministry. He walked through uncertainty without becoming controlled by it because his confidence rested in the one who never changes. The same invitation remains open today. Every dawn offers another opportunity to remember where your life truly begins. We are just scratching the surface of this ancient power. Get ready, because in our next video, I will reveal even deeper Aramaic codes that unlock spiritual authority you've never imagined. Make sure you are subscribed and have notifications turned on so you don't miss this unfolding revelation. I am glad you are here, and I mean that deeply. The fact that you are seeking this knowledge tells me everything about where you are in your journey. Study guides with deeper teachings are waiting for you in the pinned comment below. With gratitude for walking this path together. Before you leave, if this message touched your heart or brought new understanding into your life, WRITE, the word restoration in the comments below. Your testimony may encourage someone else who is seeking healing and renewal. Thank you for sharing this moment of ancient wisdom with us. Until the next revelation, walk in peace, walk in freedom, and walk in the power of Ephatha.